Kelly Thibault, the Executive Director of Secure Diversity and the person behind Day of Security, who does most of the operations and administrative aspects. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to wrapping this up. But first, I wanted to get us started and I wanted to introduce our keynote. So I actually had the pleasure of hearing her a few years ago at a Lesbians Who Tech conference. And I thought, this woman is fantastic. She sounds really interesting. And so I was able to reach out to her and say, hey, would you like to come keynote for us? And she said yes, and we're really excited to have her here. So we have Dr. Cheryl Cooper. She's a U.S. Naval veteran. She holds a doctorate in computer science, focusing on information assurance. And she's also a senior cybersecurity engineer and has earned several cybersecurity certifications in CISSP, CISSA, and CDPSE. She has over 15 years of cybersecurity experience and 12 plus years teaching higher education as an adjunct professor. Dr. Cooper also sits on multiple cybersecurity boards. She's the founder of Women in Security Mentors, and as a speaker and panelist, she uses her platform to advocate and create equal opportunities for women and minorities in technology careers. She's very passionate about helping others, which is demonstrated that through her variety of community initiatives. She's also the recipient of multiple awards, including being a champion and bridge builder. An esteemed and well-respected professional and mentor, Dr. Cooper also adds author to her resume, and her memoir, Hood to Hooded, was released in February 2023 and is available on Amazon. So be sure you check that out as well. And now I'll welcome Dr. Cooper to the stage, and she can share with us her knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for that warm introduction. And hello, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here today. One of the things that resonated with me as I've had an opportunity to attend some of the sessions was when we're talking about entering this amazing field of cybersecurity and technology, we talked about the need to network and we talked about mentoring. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. But the first thing I wanted to point out is that today I'm going to share some of my stories with you from my memoir, Hood to Hooded. And I'm going to discuss things such as drug addiction, sexual assault, and some of the things that I may talk about may trigger those who have experienced trauma. For example, just the word rape may trigger some, and it is my goal, my primary goal, is to ensure that the audience that is here today with us, that is safe mentally as well as physically. So if you've felt any trauma and you feel that you're getting at that point, please log out of this session, and we thoroughly understand because your mental well-being is safe. Now, how did I get to where I am today in writing this memoir, Hood to Hooded? When we went into COVID about 2020, everyone went home. I am a strong advocate for women in security and even more so women of color, to advocate for them, to mentor the marginalized and the underrepresented women. I held meetups, workshops, and training sessions. Well, I was no longer able to get to my base because everything had closed down. So I decided I'm going to write a book on how do you get into this amazing field and how do you do it successfully? And I had 3 other women that I was going to interview. Well, I started out on my process writing that book, and I said, you know what? I've written a dissertation, but I've never written a book. So I got a writing coach, and I gave her my manuscript, which was only about a third of the way through, and she said, hear me out. She said, this is 2 books. And she said, you need to tell your story first because my avatar, my reader, really didn't care whether I had a DR in front of my name. They want to know how I got out of the projects, out of the hood to become Dr. Cheryl Cooper. And it was probably weeks before I agreed to do that because I was afraid of exposing my past. But I agreed to do it because I thought if I could touch someone else's life, then it would be worth it. So I'm sure if I was there in person, and which I know just looking at Slack, when I looked across the Slack channel, I said, you and I are really not that different. We may not look alike. We may not have the same credentials, but there is one thing that we all have in common here, this thing that binds us together. And that is we understand the importance of STEM and technology on the economy, but we also value how technology impacts our lives. There are jobs that are plentiful today in technology and cybersecurity, but many of these jobs in 5 to 10 years will no longer exist. They will be replaced by new technology, artificial intelligence, robots, and quantum computing. This new technology will need to be secured. I'm sure that plenty of you know that there are 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally and 600,000 or near 600,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the United States. Now, did you know that women only make up around 26% of the cybersecurity jobs? And when we look at IT jobs, women are only around 26, 27% in the profession. But when we look up into the corporate America organizational chart at the CTO level, Chief Technology Officer, CSO, Chief Security Officer, and CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, we see less and less and less of the woman. And even more so, we see less of the woman of color. When we look at the cybersecurity engineer, look at these figures, 66% are whites. And when we look at all other minority groups, Asians, Blacks, African Americans, Hispanics, Latino, Native American, Native Alaskans, all under 10%. Based on these numbers, it should be more than not likely that I should not be here speaking with you today. But here I am with a PhD, 20 plus years in cybersecurity and technology, mentoring marginalized individuals and women seeking to pursue careers in cybersecurity. But I wasn't always this confident. I felt like the sins of my past would prevent me from being a leader. You see, I grew up in the hood, in the heart, in the inner city, in the projects of Kansas City, where drugs and violence and crime ran rapid. Drugs became a way of my life well into my adulthood. Now, one would have thought once I had my daughter, I would have left, but I was too thick into the bowels of that street life, of that drug life, until one day I said, I can't take this anymore. And I decided to join the Navy, and that's where I got my start into technology. So how did I beat the odds? Well, I can say one thing, it sure wasn't easy, and you're going to hear about some of that today. But I am strong in my belief that we need to do a better job at changing those statistics with women and the minority woman. The cybersecurity field needs to mentor, celebrate, and uplift each other. I have been on a mission to change this in the cybersecurity industry, and I am here today to ask you to join forces with me. Together, we can choose to make a difference, a different reality by closing the race and the gender gap. Now, it is said that we have defining moments, those moments in our life in which we are faced with circumstances in which we are forced to decide. I'm going to share with you some of my defining moments and the powerful lessons that were yielded. It is said that every day there is a stimulus and then there is a response. And in between here is our power to decide. And in that decision is our response, our freedom, and our growth. Now imagine for a moment me, a 5-year-old little girl dressed to the nines on an Easter Sunday morning. Now, my sister, she was dressed the same way. My mother did our hair that morning, but as you can see back then, mine was short and very kinky, unlike my sister who had long, flowy locks. And she was also blessed with fair skin, unlike me who had darker skin. But I can still recall until this day how much fun that my sister and I had finding those Easter eggs. Well, after we got done with our Easter egg hunt, my sister and I ran over to my mother, who were talking to the other church ladies. And the church ladies looked down at my sister and said, "Wow, she is so beautiful. Oh, Martha, isn't she the cutest thing?" And as I stood there, I thought for a moment. I said, "You know what? Maybe they don't see me." And so I put my hands behind my back. I took a few steps forward and I looked up with my big brown eyes and I smiled. I never received that compliment that day. I never was told that I was pretty too. And at that moment, I knew what life was going to be like for me with my browner skin and my nappy hair. I felt invisible. When we consistently suppress our intuitive knowingness about our greatness and instead look to others to validate us, to approve us, we instantly lose our power. Colorism. Do you guys know what colorism is? Colorism, rooted in the Black community, colorism, rooted in slavery, where the darker skinned woman would pick cotton and the lighter skinned woman would work in the big house. Colorism, being judged based on the color of your skin. Colorism, being judged based on if your skin is dark or if your skin is light. Colorism, having your character judged based on the shade of your skin. You see, on that day, I was not able to pass this brown paper bag. This brown paper bag that we often see in our neighborhood grocery store. You see, I was darker than this brown paper bag. And for girls like me, or who were darker than me, this was almost like a sentence for invisibility. On that day, I decided that girls with fair skin and pretty hair were better than me. But later, I learned how to play the game. I knew that I was better than the dark color of my skin. I got me some weed, wore me some wigs, put on my makeup. I wore designer suits. You see, I did not want to appear to be poor or disadvantaged. I did everything that I could to adopt to European standards. I did everything that I could, although there was always the Karen that reminded me, now, Cheryl, don't go out dressing the boss. But at that time, I wore a mask. I was not authentic. As I navigated corporate America, being a woman, and at that intersection of being Black. When we are in environments in which our value is not appreciated, if we continue to stay in that environment, our gift will shrink. Now, look at this Hershey candy bar. A Hershey candy bar that looks just like this on my screen changed my life forever. Now, I can recall back then when I was 13, 14 years old, it was a hot summer day. And as the sun set, my brother said, hey, let's all go to the drive-in. And he said, Cheryl, do you want to go? And of course I did. He said, well, you got to jump into the trunk of the car because they didn't have the money to pay for me. And I didn't have a problem with that because, of course, I have done it before. And as we got into the drive-in, I sat down on the concrete floor, and my brother's friend gave me this Hershey candy bar that looked just like this one. As I sat there watching the movie, I got a little dizzy, and then I began to giggle, just like this giggle, as I began to see colors, red, green, blue, purple, from the sight of eye to the touch of my fingers, a rainbow of color. I began to giggle as I saw a reel of Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, and Donald Duck. You see, I was only 13 or 14 years old when my brother's friend looked around at the other kids and said, I put a little acid on her chocolate Hershey candy bar. He said it was only a little, and I took some too, and I'll ride out this high with her together. Well, maybe it wasn't a big deal for him, but it was for me. I don't remember much else that occurred that night, but one thing that I do remember, I remember how beautiful everything was. Everything that was dull and lifeless had come to life. It was beautiful with all the colors. And I thought maybe for once, getting high on acid was the way for me to find peace and beauty in the world. It was enchanting. I craved for this peace and beauty in a world that left me feeling unseen. I chose to get high more than just a few times on acid. But those acid trips weren't always beautiful. Many of them were like nightmares, which sometimes I wasn't sure if I would return to reality. Imagine for a moment me laying across my mother's bed just resting. I wasn't high. And then there was a picture on the wall. It was a picture of boats in a marina that sat upon the water as I began to see the boats swaying in the dock. As I saw the water ripple, I said, oh, wow, that is so beautiful. As I looked upon the wall in amazement, there was a snake in my bed with a white body and a big blue head. Right now, I was so afraid. As I kicked my feet and I gritted and I opened and closed my eyes, I thought it would go away. I jumped up out of the bed. I grabbed my head and I said, I can't take it. I can't take it. When I opened my eyes, the picture was still and the snake was gone. I realized at that time I had had a flashback, a bad trip that they call it, and I made the choice that I would never, ever get high on acid again. But that wasn't the end of drugs for me. I continued through high school, attracted to getting high. But guess what? I actually graduated from high school. And when I graduated from high school, I decided that I was going to go to college. And I decided I was going to major in theater. Well, the only thing I learned about going to college is that majoring in theater was not a place for Black girls. Either there were no parts for Black girls or they were minority parts. So I dropped out of high school and I went back home. I went back to the streets, what I knew, and I met a drug dealer. He asked me to marry him, and I did. And it wasn't long after that before I became addicted and I became an addict. I began to see my family and my friends dying or going to jail, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it would be me. You see, I even had my daughter at that time, and I knew if anything happened, it would just not be me, it would be my daughter as well. I talked to my husband and I said, I gotta get out. And I decided to join the United States Navy. I said, something inside of me, this intuitive knowingness that I was more than just the streets. And I enlisted in the United States Navy. I enlisted as a radioman technical controller where I was troubleshooting telecom systems. And I was promoted at all the right times. I was on my way up. I was getting into STEM and I was a respected soldier. And then on my second tour, I was raped, tortured, raped by a civilian, not another military soldier, raped by a civilian. And any time that this happens, it is terrible for the victim, whether that individual is a man or a woman, to have to go through someone who assaults you and violates you. But this was another experience that I had where the color of my skin would play a big part. Because I was darker, the people I sought help for said behind doors and through whispers, she must have wanted it. I stopped seeing my psychiatrists and my psychologists as they ignored me, and I suffered in silence as I began to cope using unhealthy ways to soften the pain. I began to cut myself. And I suffered in silence until one day, when I was at the Veterans Hospital for another issue in which I had dislocated my shoulders when I was in the military, I was asked, how was I doing? And I shared this experience I had in the military. And they asked if I wanted to see someone. And it had been years, but I was still cutting. And I agreed. And on that day, I spoke with a psychiatrist, and he said, you know what? We think you need time away from the world. And they wanted to lock me up in the Veterans Hospital. And I said, no way, I'm going home. And they asked me to sit there in that room. And when I saw the doctor leave, I peeked out the door and I ran. And I looked back, and there he was. And I kept running and running. And when we got to the turnstile, he put his foot in the door, and I quickly dashed over to another door, and I ran out of the hospital. But I stopped, and he was beside me with a police officer. I knew that day I wasn't going anywhere. And I went back into the hospital where I spent 3 days. And even to today, I am very vigilant about my mental and physical well-being. I learned from that experience is that maybe we cannot control the events that happen in our life. Do not have to let them define us. But also on that second tour, or 2 years into that tour, even though the military was one of the best decisions that I made, 2 years into that tour, my husband succumbed to the streets when he was shot in the top of his head on a drug deal going wrong. Now that could have been me and my daughter. After I decided to get out of the military and to look at other opportunities, I enjoyed telecommunications, in which I gravitated to telecom companies, some of the biggest Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies. I started working for a telecom company, and then I later started to work for Sprint, and then I later ended up at T-Mobile. And when I look back on my past, I used to think I failed. But when I started writing my memoir, I said, these failures, I wish I had failed more so that I could have shared these stories with others, because this was a part of my growth. And I also learned not just a part of my growth, but it was also an opportunity in corporate America to learn. I decided in my career, in order to be successful and coming from that hood and coming into corporate America, that I and we I've heard today, I hope I didn't lose my connection, so much about in this field, we need to be life learners. We need to network. We need to mentor with each other. And so when I got out of the military, I decided that I was going to get a master's degree. I had already had an MBA, in which I achieved when I was in the military. I took advantage of that. But I got a second master's degree in criminal justice. And then later I said to myself, because I thought in corporate America, I was doing all the right things. I had gotten my degree. I had gotten certifications in cybersecurity. I was showing my value. Have you ever asked yourself, how can I show my value so that I could get promoted? I oftentimes volunteered for those high visibility projects. I was promoted as manager of business continuity and disaster preparedness. This was during the time that the World Trade Center was bombed. This was at a time that it was something new for everyone, right? We didn't know how to respond to this type of event, especially in the telecom industry when you had every carrier who had cable running underground through the World Trade Center. Everyone was down. Those mutual agreements where we traditionally road traffic to another carrier, that wasn't going to work here because every carrier was down. Those mutual agreements when we bring in generators to put power, that wasn't going to work because every carrier was asking for generators. So what did we do? We had to come up with something new. And I was that manager leading those efforts in which we laid cable completely around ground zero to get that traffic up so that loved ones could call into New York and check on their loved ones. But I still wasn't getting promoted at the rate that I wanted to. So I decided I'm going to go back and get me a doctorate degree. I felt that my doctorate degree would be equal to a white male, but I still wasn't initially promoted. But I learned from that experience. At first, I was a little bitter, but I learned we've got to go through the process. If we're not religious, we have to at least believe in faith, or you believe in the universe. It's something else that's better, or there's still things that we need to learn. And so I realize now it may have taken me a little longer, but I've learned so many lessons. And this is the reason why today I am mentoring hundreds and hundreds of women. This intersectionality of being Black and a woman, what do we mean when we talk about intersection? Intersection, how people can be judged or discriminated against based on intersecting identities. For me, it was a woman in Black. For some, it could be a woman Hispanic. For some, it could be a woman disabled. And others, it could be an individual who is LGBTQ. How is that journey different that causes the workplace to create a culture that introduces implicit, explicit bias, unconscious bias, and conscious bias? Being a Black and a woman, a person encounters bias and discrimination. And I went through that through most of my career until the last company that I worked with, who has been very inclusive. And I'd like to share with you some of those things that we can introduce into our company culture and where it is inclusive and diverse. So with this lack of inclusivity and equity and diversity, and when I think about my past, when I look at the Black and brown girl who consistently was overlooked and the white male was promoted up, remember those figures I shared with you? We see the white male at the CEO and the VP level because the broken ladder, the glass cliff is real. When we look at these numbers here, by leaned in a study that they did last year with 423 organizations and a survey of 65,000 employees. When we look at the manager level, this is where we begin to see where the woman is not promoted. At the manager level, white men are at 42%, but the woman of color is at 12%. At the VP level, the white male is at 50%, 6%, the white female at 24%, but the woman of color now drops down to 7%. And when we go up to the SVP level, the white male increases, and then the white female and the woman of color, the numbers go down. And why is that? Because of the broken rung has been broken, and we have less of a pool of women at this level, which is why I am here today to ask you to join forces with me, and where we need to create this community of collaboration and unity for women. I used to think when I started speaking and mentoring, I used to think when I was mentoring and speaking, I thought that maybe I wasn't the right one to do it. I have quite the past, right? But when I thought about it, I said, on the contrary, I am more than qualified to influence other women. I want you, as we leave here today and we close out today, is to think about, connect with someone else here, connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with them through email, get their information and start to connect and create a relationship. In order for us to create that next generation of women in security, we have got to come together, unite, mentor, celebrate, and uplift. And so I'm going to close out here. And so from now on, whenever you eat or see a Hershey candy bar, I want you to think about the stories that you heard here today. When I think about it, I am no longer the 5-year-old little girl who feels invisible. Remember that I could have chosen to let a past littered with indecisions to keep me small. Remember, I could have chosen to let the color of my skin or the kinky texture of my hair to keep me from contributing to the world. Remember, I could have chosen to stay addicted to drugs and succumb to the streets. Remember, I could have stayed on those violent streets of Kansas City. Remember, I could have chosen not to get help when the pain from my traumatic experiences surfaced. I could have chosen not to be a mentor, but I chose to be a mentor and a leader to others, and I am still rising above anyone's expectations. And so when you leave here today, I want you to consider, how can you make changes in a system that suppresses us? Let's do that. I have other suggestions in my memoir, Hooded, on how you can get involved. Together, we can make the world for the next generation of cybersecurity and technology professionals better, more diverse, and more inclusive. Let's do that. With purpose, with passion, we will be unstoppable. Thank you, and I would love to hear your questions.
All right. So I'm not seeing any questions yet, but lots of really positive feedback.
I can see the private chat. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly, I can see the private chat. Are there any questions? Kelly, if you can just let me know if there's any questions. I don't see any here on my screen. Okay, I have a question here. How do you handle men that were dismissive to you in the work world? Well, if I could share with you an experience I just had about a month ago, I met with the Tech Council. I sit on the board as an advisor for one of the largest cybersecurity conferences that go around the United States to advise them on what type of content that they should bring in. We met at a restaurant. We sat at round tables in which there were 5 or 6 of us at each table. I asked one of the individuals, a white male, if he could brief me. I was just a tad late. And he started talking, and then he just stopped talking to me and he started talking to the other males. It was only myself and another woman who was sitting there. And based on the way that she looked, she was from India. And as we sat there, they completely ignored us and they talked among themselves. And so when he came up for air, I waited for him to come. You know, a lot of times men will not come up for air. But when he did come up for air, I politely said that he cut me off and that we are there for a reason and we have a voice and we are going to speak. And then I start rattling off because this was my area. What we were talking about was diversity, inclusivity, equity. And so I said, that's the very issue that we're discussing. And you just totally dismissed us here, 2 women of color. And I went in very respectful. And they sat there silent. Well, after we got done speaking, we all broke off for dinner. And one of the gentlemen that was at that table came over and sat by me, and we ate and we continued to talk. And so he really wanted to learn. And actually, he said, I did not mean to disrespect you or. And so sometimes they just do it unconsciously. And so my recommendation is, and you know what? I have to share with you, there was a time I may have just sat there, but I'm confident. I knew that if you know the topic, you will speak up. And I didn't let it happen. Now, I let the event organizers know what I had went through. And they say, Cheryl, we're so glad that you came tonight. And we're glad that you were sitting at that table. So yeah, just speak up. How did you handle difficult conversations about promotions with male managers? I'm sure that I got the same thing that a lot of you have. Well, Cheryl, you don't have experience in this area. And guys, I have to tell you, that's where, even though I'm a life learner, and what more degree can I get after I get a PhD? But I'm constantly reading articles, staying abreast of trends, even going back and doing those exams again, those certifications exams, because some of my exams I took were 10, 15 years ago to keep me current. But when I have the male tell me, well, Cheryl, you don't have this experience, what I found in my career is that I was always told I didn't have one skill. I could have a host of credentials and accomplishments. But then I was told, I didn't have one thing. And the other individual who was promoted, they had the one thing that they were looking for. Of course, oftentimes hiring managers have a lot of discretion in hiring. And that's what we have to do better and hold our companies accountable, HR, in ensuring that they're hiring the best people, but they aren't allowing these individuals with these biases to continue to hire and promote males and not looking at the woman. And so it's not a lot that you can do when you can have a male. I actually did. I went to HR in one of the Fortune 100 companies that I worked for. They had no women at a manager level in cybersecurity in an organization with 250 people in cybersecurity, not one female in a management position. And the VP over HR told me, we give the hiring manager a lot of discretion. And see, nothing was done about that. But I have to share with you, with the incident with George Floyd over this last 3 years, you had people coming in and hiring all these D&I folks. They began to look a little closer at diversity, and they begin to look at women. And we've seen a lot more women coming into cybersecurity, and now we're beginning to see them promoted. But there's still a lot of work to do when we talk about 26, 27%. And so what we have to ensure is not that we just don't have all these women coming in, but we have got to provide them a career pathway. If we don't provide them a career pathway, support, unity, mentoring, celebrating, they're going to leave. Okay, you spoke of your mentorship program. How can I become part of this to be mentored and become a mentee? Well, my mentoring organization, I started it off back in 2018 when I saw that the woman of color wasn't getting recognized back there in that same place where I came from. Okay, so this is my last response. When we look at those women that are underserved in the inner city community, a lot of times they're not being exposed to these rewarding careers. And so now what I do, I bring them into companies, Fortune 500, 100, Fortune 50 companies, to expose them. My mentoring organization was local to Kansas City, but I'm getting ready to close out that 501c3. And in January 2024, I will be setting up a WCIS, and I'll have Kelly share that with you guys. WCIS, WICYS. They are an international association, and the reason I'm doing it is so that I can provide more access and resources to my base. They offer training. They offer training to help you to sit for certification. They have a mentoring program where they pull mentors from around the world. They do an annual conference, in-person conference. So I'm going to be starting up my chapter. The reason I'm not doing it now is because to be on the board for that association, you have to be a member for 90 days. And a lot of my board members, they're getting their 90 days in right now. But please connect with me on LinkedIn if you need help right now. And I saw in another session that I attended, one of the individuals said, what other associations are there for women that other than WCIS? And most of your international associations that provide certification, such as ISC Square, they have a women's association, and they also have a cybersecurity certificate program that you can sit for that is free. You also have ISC score. ISACA. They're more of an auditing association. They also have a women's section. And then you have ISSA. They are International System Security Association. They are not a certification organization, but they do have a women's section as well. And I see Deidre says SANS. SANS also, of course, we all know they have all kinds of training, but most of these international associations, they do have a women's association as well. And so that was my last question for today. But Kelly, please share my information with everyone, and I look forward to connecting with you all. And good luck on your journey. The world is yours. Take it.
Yay. Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. I don't know about all of you, but I haven't been to church in a long time, but I felt like I went to church today in the best way possible. And so I am going to bring up Deidre and Brenley to join me so we can do some closing remarks with you all, give you some reminders, and go from here. Awesome.
No doubt. That was a wonderful keynote. So vulnerable. Loved every minute of it.
I'm blown away. You know, the three of us were sitting backstage, and the other two could see me, and I'm nodding and I'm clapping. I just thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to interview her and ask her who and kept your spirits up, because we all know, as she ended, it takes others to get us through all these challenges, and just remembering that it's, those people, let's keep giving and receiving, I guess. I mean, it was so obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. And I know we all love when people are vulnerable and honest. And I so appreciate you sharing your story and being real. I think that was one of the best things, was there wasn't sugarcoating. And so just saying like, hey, this is how it is, or how it can be. And I think we need to hear that more often.
Agreed. Terrific.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, let's get this wrapped up. It has been a journey, and we're excited to talk about next steps, do a little wrap up. So just like we shared a video this morning, I have another one for you, and then we will share some updates from that.
Dance music.
I was like, I don't know what that was. 1 second. I have it queued. I just need to share it. Okay. There we go. Cool. And that's it.
Awesome. That was awesome. We are announcing our dates.
Yep.
Oh.
April 25th and 26th. Join us. We're working on if it'll be all virtual or hybrid. So that will be TBD, but the call for programs will be launched in January. And make sure you're signed up for our mailing list, and we always email, and we put it on social media and in the Slack as well. And if you're not in the Slack, if you registered email me if you registered before noon Pacific time yesterday. If you've registered since noon yesterday, then you probably weren't added, and that will happen tomorrow.
And first time, second time, third time speakers, this is your place to come speak in a community that's going to support you and give you the ability to practice. That's what we're doing here. We know your content's good. It's nerve-wracking. So when you're new, it's okay. This is a safe place to bring that experience.
And don't forget to connect with each other, right? This is not just a one stop. We are going to continue the relationships and nurture them over time.
Yes. Yes. Keep in touch and help each other out. And continue to practice speaking and sharing and communicating. It's the key to everything. Nobody calls me and says, I need somebody. It's a bad communicator. So I think that's a good way to end it. Come from love, send love, everybody. And we'll see you online.
And one last thing, if you love today, we're always looking for testimonials and people's stories. I put a link in the chat, so grab that. I also shared it in the Slack, but we would love you to share your testimonial with us, how DOS has impacted you, or even your experience today. It really helps us to tell our story.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, everyone. We love seeing you. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.